speaker is Dr. Benjamin Schvarcz. Benjamin is a postdoctoral fellow at the Hebrew University and recently completed 2 years of postdoctoral research fellowship in the Department of Politics at Princeton University. Benjamin has recently accepted an offer to join the Department of Political Studies at Ilan University. We're very proud. And he is already a research fellow at the Argov Center at Bar-Ilan University, which has also contributed to this conference. Benjamin is specializing in Jewish political thought in 2 historical contexts: ancient rabbinic literature and the modern state of Israel. His articles published or are forthcoming in journals such as Politics and Religion, Harvard Theological Review, and Jewish Quarterly Review.
What is the place of the State of Israel in the political theory of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks? In future tense, he proudly shares the story of his great-grandfather, Rabbi Aryeh Leib Frumkin, who had built the first house in my hometown, Petach Tikva, which Sacks translates into English as Gateway of Hope. Rabbi Sacks writes, quote, "The Jewish attachment to Israel goes back some 4,000 years ago. Indeed, most readers of Sacks's writings see him as holding the standard modern Orthodox pro-Zionist and pro-Israel position. They see a consensus between Israel's Zionist ideology and the teachings of the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom. Is this a correct understanding of Sacks? My argument is that the Zionist ideology that is prevalent in Israel does not easily conform with Jonathan Sacks's political theory. I should say at the outset that Rabbi Sacks was undoubtedly a great supporter of Israel. He defined himself a religious Zionist, and he was. Nevertheless, I argue that the underlying logic of the State of Israel is missing from one important piece of his political theory. Sometimes it seems as though it is even rejected. In my presentation, I will focus mainly on one book entitled The Home We Build Together, Recreating Society, which is probably his main work of political theory published in 2007. In his introduction to the Hebrew version of his book To Heal a Fractured World, The Ethics of Responsibility, Sacks writes, quote, "The book, originally published in Britain and America, truly belongs to the people and state of Israel," end of quote. The reason is simple, he says. Judaism is not just a religion. Judaism is concerned with constructing a society. And that happens and can only happen in one place. That place is Israel. In Israel, Judaism can live not only privately, but it is also lived collectively in the public domain. This sounds like Judaism is primarily concerned with both religion and politics. That is especially true if we accept the classic Greek point of view that social thought is inextricably linked with political thought. According to this view, it is the task of political leaders to shape a thriving society. Studying political problems and possible solutions is the work of the political philosophers. But that, I argue, is a wrong interpretation of Rabbi Sacks, because Sacks explicitly rejects the Greek fusion of society and polity. Sacks makes the space for society which is not only separated from politics and from political organization, but society precedes politics. Society appears in human life before the state. First society, then politics. And as we will see, this idea allows him to put forward a vision of a liberal and neutral state within which operates a rich and diverse society. Sacks, the passionate supporter of the liberal democracy, though himself not a liberal, would not accept Plato's view that, quote, "the modes of music are never disturbed without unsettling of the most fundamental political and social conventions," end of quote. For Sacks, music, literature, fashion, religion, ethnicities, they are all social dynamic phenomena. Music can change, but the state remains intact. Especially was Sacks opposed to the Greco-Roman view that politics is the highest good. The ancient maxim, which became an Israeli slogan, that it is pleasant and proper to die for one's country, represented in the eyes of Jonathan Sachs a negative form of republicanism. In the Israeli context, this maxim resonates with the need of young citizen soldiers to fight and sometimes even die to defend their country. Sachs, however, argued that the liberal state is intended to serve the citizen and not vice versa. Therefore, if we thought for a moment that for Sachs politics is essential to Judaism, we should know that this is not so. I'll cite some of his statements aimed at diminishing the political in Judaism from chapter 19 of his book, The Home We Build Together. Quote, "Far from being the highest good, politics is a necessary evil. The fundamental principle of biblical morality is love. The Hebrew Bible is profoundly ambivalent about politics. The rule of one human being over another is inherently antithetical to human dignity. Only God has that right. Religion in the biblical sense is not about power, it is not about the state." He goes so far in this direction that while acknowledging the importance of the ancient prophets of Israel, he diminishes the impact of the biblical kings. Rabbi Sachs asks rhetorically, quote, "Who today remembers the kings of ancient Israel or Judah?" End of quote. Rabbi Sachs's fundamental argument that politics, power, government, state, and kings are an unimportant part of biblical religion is in tension with Israel's Zionist prevalent ideology, which holds that Jewish self-determination is central to Judaism, that the Jewish state is what Jews are called by the Torah to establish and defend, that the state is not merely a shelter that allows Jews to live, but having their own polity is part and parcel of the Jewish story and of how Jewish national life should look like. From this perspective, Judaism is essentially political. The question that Jonathan Sachs, the philosopher, wants to resolve in The Home We Build Together is, quote, "The nation state is fragmenting before our eyes. What in such a world is the meaning of the word home?" He argues that European states had moved from the model of country house, hosting newcomers as guests, who are expected to assimilate into their new national identity, just as his own parents did. The current political model in Europe, says Sachs, is a multicultural hotel in which everyone remains a stranger with no loyalty or feeling of belonging. The shortcomings of these models are obvious, argues Rabbi Sachs, so we need a third, which he names The Home We Build Together, where newcomers share in the work, responsibility, and culture of the new dynamic society. I know he is speaking of Western country, but allow me a quick thought about the potential implications of this thesis for Israel. First, the only newcomers to Israel are Jews, and they are seen as returning home. Israeli Arab citizens cannot be seen as newcomers. That problem is more serious. Besides not hosting anyone, Israel is also not a hotel, because Israel requires its citizens to belong in a robust way. It educates citizens to hold the Zionist ideology. You see why Israel is not, and perhaps cannot, become a home built by all its citizens. Now you might be thinking, but this theory is not about Israel, and you're right. But then Rabbi Sachs interprets the Jewish tradition to support this home built together model. This will create tension, because Zionism draws on the Bible in support of an entirely different political model. Biblical Israel, says Sachs, is a nation whose unity is not ethnic, but civic. Contemporary scholars, he says, agree that Israelite society was an ethnic mix, end of quote. He even cites Jean-Jacques Rousseau's point on the Jews, that they were, quote, a people mingled with foreigners, no longer perhaps having a single descendant of the early races, end of quote. This approach enables Sachs to render the Bible relevant to multicultural societies today. Hence, the Bible is not taken to focus exclusively on the story of the family of Jacob and of his descendants. Then Sachs asks, how did Moses create a unity out of diversity? I would think that the answer lies in the law revealed to Moses by God. But from Sachs's point of view, that would mean that the Torah is not suitable to address contemporary Western European states. Therefore, Sachs proposes that, quote, not all the miracle of Exodus combined, not even the revelation at Sinai itself, turned the Israelites into a nation, end of quote. What created the nation was God's command to the Israelites to build a tabernacle. The political lesson from this is that individuals should build something together if they want to become a nation. On the level of political theory that is not biblically inspired, Sachs argues that, just like his supervisor at Cambridge, the philosopher Roger Scruton, for a civic nationalism, sometimes called territorial nationalism. They both argued for this form of nationalism rather than religiously or ethnically based nationalisms. What is the kind of the nationalism that they promote? Scruton writes, democracies need a national rather than religious or an ethnic we. The nation state, as we now conceive it, is the byproduct of human neighborliness shaped by an invisible hand from the countless agreements between people who speak the same language and live side by side. End of quote. Scruton speaks of a nationalism that is not religious, not ethnic, which is not the result of being neighbors. Which is the result of being neighbors. It is based on territory, it is shaped spontaneously, and it is based on language. Sachs presents a similar view in The Home We Build Together when he writes, for example, that, quote, the nation is where I live. It is the landscape that I inhabit, the language I speak, the culture that surrounds me, and the society of which I am part, end of quote. In Israel, however, nationalism is understood differently. First, the question who is part of the Jewish nation is defined by religious law. Second, Jews are seen as an ethnic group which requires a demanding conversion for those wishing to join. Third, in Israel, Jews are seen as a nation prior to being neighbors. Fourth, they are a nation because they are at least seen to be descendants of Jacob. Fifth, the nation was created by the intention of God, if you accept the biblical story as it is, or by leaders such as Abraham or Moses, in any case, not by an invisible hand. Language is only one element of the rich Jewish culture. Seventh, while non-Jewish citizens live in the land of Israel and they are neighbors, they are not part of the Jewish nation. And eighth, by contrast, non-Israeli Jews are seen as part of the family and as part of the nation. Whereas I do not expect Scruton to take Israel into account, I am surprised that a great religious Zionist thinker and leader like Rabbi Sachs does not add to his political philosophy book, The Home We Build Together, a word about the distinct Jewish nationalism that sustains Israel. I would like to conclude by proposing that Rabbi Sachs indeed had a vision for Israel, one that is different from what the modern state of Israel is and from what it has been since its inception. And the different points that I laid before you today are an essential part of the fundamental change that Jonathan Sachs would want to see in this land of Israel, which was so precious to him. Such a vision would perhaps include the following points. First, Israel should be a thinner state with a more robust and diverse society. Second, it should minimize the link between religion and state. Third, improve the status of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria and of Israeli Arabs. Fourth, the state of Israel should serve its citizens and not vice versa. And fifth, he would certainly want to see more civility and tact in Israeli culture. I do not know if all this is achievable, but that might be the direction Sachs would want to see. The synthesis between Rabbi Sachs's political theory for Britain and his vision for Israel is well expressed in his statement in future tense that Israel, quote, can create a new civic Judaism, one that embraces religious and secular, Jew and Palestinian alike. The challenge for a new religious Zionism is to build a society worthy of being a home to the divine presence by honoring the divine image in all its citizens. Thank you.